where the tools are that are going to help you simplify it, because it's not the easiest thing to have it. So we went through and kind of played with the different programs that they have out there that would give you the buy versus rent scenario, because there's calculators online that will do that. And you want it where you can actually give it to your client so that they can understand it, because this is absolutely phenomenal, but it is a bit overwhelming too. I mean, if you are, and some of the people who have been doing it for a long time, they do that already, the mathematics on it, but to be able to give them a tool that they can do it themselves as well, or you give it to them and print it out and send it to them, would be a huge asset. The easiest one, there's a couple different ones. So Realtor.com has the buy versus rent calculator. Trulia has the buy versus rent, and then the New York Times has one as well. So we kind of wanted to use the one that's going to be the most simple to use, just because it's user friendly and you don't want to overwhelm them too much with the information. So we already programmed in the rent versus buy, so it's already pops up for you. So you can just Google Trulia rent versus buy if you want to give them this scenario on it. So the scenario is like, what is your target monthly rent? So, we just did the 2,100 is kind of the range that they're at. And this is already auto-populated. So, he was looking at, let's just use the 400,000. So you can kind of play with it. I think you're at what, 420?
Yep.
So 420. And then it does make a difference how long that they plan on living in the house. So obviously the factors that you're going to have to take into account is if it's short term, the amount of appreciation that happens in the house, how much that they would have. So there's going to be factors that are all involved with it, which, when we see that on the paper, especially because as realtors, you deal with it, but it's on a different level. I know TRID's gotten where you now have to, when you're filling out, you have to fill more financial information out on the contracts. But in some ways, you guys actually see less now, because you guys don't even get to see the closing documents unless the borrower gives it to you. You don't see the seller side anymore, so you don't even know if your fees are on there or home warranty or all that kind of stuff. So when you kind of have where this will be an asset for you to be able to use, where you're actually getting a hold of the financial stuff in the beginning part, so that you can explain to them where the advantages are. So say, for example, the scenario I had was 5 years that the person would live there, and then the income tax. So it depends on which area. So DC's 8.5 for the tax, which is a little bit, we're going to use the same as what is in Virginia, so it's average numbers. The rate's going to be a little bit higher. We're going to do it as a 3.9, let's just say. So you can play with this when they're doing it. And then rate-wise, obviously you guys don't want to quote rates because you don't know, what it is, and then that gets you in that whole awkward moment with them when they find out, that one, they could have gotten a better rate, or you actually quoted too high and you scared them. So you could always defer to us and, text, because send a text, hey, what would be a 95 no MI? So that, say it's 3.95 for that. That way they know their numbers. And, I'm sure you've worked with all of us. We sleep with our phones practically. So we text right back, and most of the time we know what those numbers are offhand, because we have to pull them each day. So that way you guys don't have to do that. You can always text if you want to write up this scenario, like if you're getting ready to go meet someone. So some of the factors too that you're going to look at. And the nice thing with this one is they do have where you can actually click on the sides and it'll explain the difference. We'll use the 20%, but you can change this around too. So there's programs, as you guys know, there's 5% down with no MI, depending on what their credit score is. Most of those credit scores, you do have to have stronger credit scores if they have less down. Or they can go FHA 3.5%. But the nice thing with this is it explains, like if the borrower doesn't know, you just scroll over here. It'll explain exactly which each indicator is that's affecting the numbers. So the buying costs, and this varies as well. So the buying cost is like your origination, your points, and then yesterday I was showing it to a realtor, and a little bit farther down it talks about the discount. So she's like, oh my gosh, you guys charge like 2.5 in discount, but that's actually that's not what the fees are on that. So you're looking at like long-term capital gains. Most of this is pretty fixed. So short-term capital gains is obviously if it's less than a year, but hopefully, knock on wood, that's not going to impact your buyer. And then DC is 8.5 if you're 60. So that's a high tax bracket that's in DC. But there's a lot of tax benefits that you'll get in DC, depending on their income, tax abatement, all those kind of things that they can put in for. So those aren't even factored in all this. We even have, which is kind of ironic, that we have liability where we have to be very careful that after we do all this, we have to say almost every time, we are not accountants. We need and recommend for you to check with your accountant. We're giving you some basic numbers and tools that you guys can use, But and that's our job, is to go over these numbers, but we have to say that we can't do that, because if there's any change and they say, well, I bought this house because you told me I was going to save this much in it. And, now I'm in a pickle because I went out and bought this and I thought I had more money and now I don't. And at the end of the year, they thought they were going to get more because they'd already did their exemptions. You don't want to be on the hook. So bottom line is, you can either give them this tool and then say, here's some basic, and then have a disclaimer at the bottom. Here's the basic factors that we typically use if you're buying in Virginia, and here's the basic factors that you're using in Maryland. And have something at the bottom. And I don't know if you guys would want to work with that to figure out what would cover them.
Mine has that disclaimer in there. See your tax advisor, for consult. So it gets us. It gets us out of there.
Right, and put that like an asterisk at the bottom so that you're not liable, because you guys know this day and age, everybody sues. Like, you don't want to have where you're worried about it. So private mortgage insurance, or even FHA. So FHA, everybody knows now, permanent mortgage insurance, right? So that's a huge liability on those people that, unless they're going to refi out of that house, they're going to have that for the rest of their life. So that's why we're kind of steering them towards different programs. But the nice thing with the Trulia site is it actually calculates if you have mortgage insurance, if you don't have mortgage insurance. Some of the other ones don't put those benefits that are in there. And it depends, typically, I'm sure you guys probably see it too, they're so on the apps, like they know, by the time you've given them whatever the information is, they know it better than we do by the end of it, because they'll do all the research, they'll cross-reference it, and just because they're so tech savvy. So you can actually, if you give them the baseline, this will at least get so that they can calculate their numbers. So the difference between, so you could start to see how it moves. You see how it's renting's cheaper is right now, because we haven't finished putting the indicators in.
Damn, looks like Zillow.
Does it look like Zillow's?
Well, no, not Zillow's. It's just how Zillow, the verbiage that, this is priced at, 2% above, or this is, good deal or not a good deal or whatever.
So here's the economic assumptions. So these are kind of the factors that
discount rate's so high.
Yeah. So this is what I was saying, that the discount rate's at 4%. So she was like, oh my gosh, you're charging 4 points for 3.95. But that's not what a discount rate is. So the good thing is, most of you guys know what rent appreciation is. So obviously, like the scenario that Greg had used, that a year later, you get a notice that your rent just went up. So the amount of rent is going to probably increase each year. Just that's the nature of the business. So now discount rate is the opportunity cost of money. What it costs when you're having a savings or investment, or you have it somewhere else, but that is the savings that's in that house. The higher the discount rate, the more expensive home ownership is, because buying a home involves a big upfront fee. But the difference too is, on some of these with the VHGA, there isn't actually a big upfront fee. If they qualify for the grant with a 3%, or even I use DC Open Doors. So DC Open Doors, I don't know how familiar you guys are with that one, but that one goes up to 417, 3.5%, but that 3.5% is forgiven. So it's not like VHGA where, besides a grant, but like the VHGA FHA Plus, where you actually have to pay back that 3.5. That's free money, which I love free money. That's when I first bought a house 20-something years ago, and we didn't have millenniums, clearly. I'm not a millennium, but you had to go to the library to, I don't know if anyone remembers that, but you had to go to the library to look up the grants and the programs. I would sit there on Saturdays to try to find, it's like a coupon. So now they have like major coupon people, but clearly that's not the era now, but now everything's online, so you can look up all the first-time home buyers. So we try to make sure we know the majority of the programs that are out there, and it's hard for you guys to know them all too, because there's so many aspects of your job that you do have to know, but knowing the discount rate and plugging it in there. So as you can see, if you're at 14%, it's cheaper right now to rent. So let's go the opposite direction. So renting is now 11% cheaper. So even if you eliminate it, the difference in it, and then inflation, those are the factors. Is the other one price appreciation?
Price appreciation is ultimately the big one that makes it or breaks it.
Yeah.
If you put 3% in there, watch what happens.
Watch the number.
This takes your equity into account right here.
This is what I was saying, that the discount rate's at 4%. So she was like, oh my gosh, you're charging 4 points for 3.95. But that's not what a discount rate is. So the good thing is, most of you guys know what rent appreciation is. So obviously, like the scenario that Greg had used, that a year later, you get a notice that your rent just went up. So the amount of rent is going to probably increase each year. Just that's the nature of the business. So Now, discount rate is the opportunity cost of money. What it costs when you're having a savings or investment or you have it somewhere else, but that is the savings that's in that house. The higher the discount rate, the more expensive home ownership is because buying a home involves a big upfront fee. But the difference too is on some of these with the VHDA, there isn't actually a big upfront fee. If they qualify for the grant with a 3%, or even I use DC Open Doors. So DC Open Doors, I don't know how familiar you guys are with that one, but that one goes up to 417, 3.5%, but that 3.5% is forgiven. So it's not like VHDA where, besides a grant, but like the VHDA FHA Plus, where you actually have to pay back that 3.5. That's free money, which I love free money. That's when I first bought a house 20-something years ago. And we didn't have millenniums, clearly. I'm not a millennium, but you had to go to the library to, I don't know if anyone remembers that, but you had to go to the library to look up the grants and the programs. I would sit there on Saturdays to try to find, it's like a coupon. So now they have like major coupon people, but clearly that's not the era now, but now everything's online, so you can look up all the first-time home buyers. So we try to make sure we know the majority of the programs that are out there. And it's hard for you guys to know them all too, because there's so many aspects of your job that you do have to know, but knowing the discount rate and plugging it in there. So as you can see, if you're at 14%, it's cheaper right now to rent. So let's go the opposite direction. So renting is now 11% cheaper. So even if you eliminate it, you know, the difference in it, and then inflation, you know, those are the factors. Is the other one price appreciation?
Price appreciation is ultimately the big one that makes it or breaks it.
Yeah.
If you put 3% in there, watch what happens.
Watch the number.
This takes your equity into account right here. You're in a rental situation where you're renting from a buddy, he's not going to raise the rent on you. Great, put 0% in there. You know, every situation is going to be dynamic and different. And so just giving them a tool that boils down, what do we say millennials want to know? Affordability. That's the affordability piece of this tool.
And the other ones are tougher to use too. So if you think there's a lot of data in this, the other ones have even more data. And so some of them will, and like they said, it's not going to be everyone that has it. But even if you get the basics of this with doing the math on every 100,000 at the $500, that's pretty basic. Like you can do your math based off that, and you can still do rounded numbers. It doesn't have to be if they're at 373 for that sales price. If you give them a roundabout payment, that at least lets them know where they're at. You don't have to have it the exact dollar, you know, and there's mortgage calculators that you could do, or just text us, we'll give you PITI. But this is a tool if you want to try to go, because some of them are, and you know, nowadays they're so intelligent and they know way more than what they did before, and they want to know more. That's the other thing, is they want to know. They want that knowledge because knowledge is power. So, and that'll help you guys if you have the ability to explain the payment to them and the tax benefits for it, for buying versus renting. And like you guys said, after 2 years, because you know the whole capital gains thing, that they can use that as another home to rent out that house, and then you know you can go get a conventional loan and count that as rental income and still qualify with a rental income. FHA, unless it's 100 miles, won't allow you to count that anymore. But so they can build their wealth with using the tools. And this might still be overwhelming. At least this is like where you're not having to do the math manually, so you have the best of both worlds. And we can always one-on-one sit down with you and go over how you do the math on that. So, because it is overwhelming and it is a lot that just went on that paper. So just text us, email, whatever, you know, walk up to us and we can work out the payment and show you how to do it, so you guys have the ability to do it too. The big thing that I'm sure most of you guys are, the selling point that you can use, how you had said that you converted your renters to buyers, was by using the VHDA. So there's 3 different programs. There's the Maryland, the DC Open Doors, and the VHDA. I'll do a quick on the DC Open Doors, and then we're kind of going over a little bit under time, so I'll make it really fast. So the DC Open Doors doesn't require a specific class. So that's one of the huge win-wins. So, you know, people get annoyed over that 8-hour class, or if they can't, and they have to physically go in. So you don't actually require all that. I know. So it's a long period of time, and they don't have to do it with DC Open Doors. It's also forgiven after 5 years. So if they stay in that house, so like the one I just closed last week was $412,000. That's a large down payment that just got forgiven after 5 years, and he will stay there for 5 years because like I'll stay here and then I'll move on because then it's forgiven. And so the advantage for it, they do have to obviously purchase in DC, which, you know, seems common sense. So, but just to be sure. So, and there isn't like a restriction on the property. They can do condos, townhouses, and it can be used with an FHA or a conventional. So the huge asset, and we have a flyer on each of these programs that's in the booklet so that you guys can kind of get a little more familiar with it.
Just had a client close 2 weeks ago who
got their 3% grant from VHCA, got their 3% seller subsidy from the seller, bought the house for about $300. It was a $340,000 townhouse. So just there's no reserve requirements, so just an incredible tool in terms of allowing folks to afford a home, get into a home without a lot of that upfront cost. It really addresses that down payment issue that we were talking about earlier. Doesn't address the student loan debt. That still is there. We can't get rid of that. But it's a great program for those folks. There's 2 flyers in your handouts, a lot of really good information in terms of income limits, eligibility, how they qualify. The MCC program on the second page goes, and you may have to read this a few times to get it, but it gives you an example in terms of how a loan would work without an MCC versus with an MCC and what the impact would be there in terms of tax refund. So certainly a program that folks should check out as they're considering purchasing here in Virginia. I love this product for a 670 credit score borrower who can qualify, but just maybe they ran into some stumbling blocks along the way, and they can still get a pretty good rate for 97% financing at 670 credit score, no MI at 4.25 is incredible.
Educate your buyers about the buying process. We talked about the data that millennials need you guys as educators to add value to the process and understanding why it's a solid financial decision to buy, what options and programs are out there right now to make that happen. Emphasizing the tax benefits in a way that doesn't get you in trouble is very important in doing the research around that ahead of time. And then also focusing on the idea that there is an equity bank in terms of the equity that you build up over time owning a home. Partnering with a solid mortgage professional, I had to at least throw that in there for 2 hours talking about this. And the idea that we're here to help you guys through that conversation, understanding that this is a lot of information. And remember what Albert Einstein said, the whole idea that you're just going to forget a lot of what you learned in school, and at the end of the day, what you got left is your education. And then be patient. Can't emphasize that enough. The idea that this isn't going to happen overnight, and millennials in particular, because we talked about that later household formation, the fact that they're not necessarily looking to get into a house right now. Millennials in your 20s are going to become your best clients in their 30s. And so spend the time with those guys now to build the relationships. It may not necessarily end up in a buy decision today, but it might be a buy decision in 3 years or 5 years. And God willing, all of you in this room are in the real estate business for the long run. I know I've been in it 11 years, and I'm seeing fruit bear that I started planting 8 years ago and 6 years ago. So the idea is to add value now. Even if you think you're not, be patient. They will come around and buy.
And the
Have more
bar,
money then.
the
Yes.
bar napkin is great because all the millennials are hanging out in the hipster, bar scene. So you'll be prepared for them. So.
And my wife helped me with this PowerPoint, and she thought this was the best slide in the entire deck. So if all else fails, this lady, her name is Lee Wachstetter. She is referred to as Mama Lee, and she lives on this cruise ship. She's lived there for 7 years, and she, for $164,000 a year, has everything taken care of. She's been to more than 100 countries throughout the world. So if you can't convince them to buy, and they don't, and they want to keep renting, just tell them to go live on cruise ships. I want to be just like Mama Lee.
Not bad.
So not too bad. And that's it, guys.